All right. Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. If you're watching us on the video stream, welcome, welcome. If you're listening to the podcast, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited about today's show. We are peeking into 2022, what the stars say about the new year with transformational coach and astrologer Lumi Pelinku, also known as the Celestial Astrologer. Lumi, we had you last year around this time on the show, so thank you for coming back.
It's so great to be back. So thanks for inviting me. I had such a blast last year.
It was so fun. We had some technical problems getting on. I'm wondering if anything is anything is coming through on your end. Any like astrological static that's causing my whole system to crash right now.
I mean, it's not the Mercury retrograde. We have that in January, but there is a Venus retrograde happening soon. So
There's a
that could
Venus
be an
retrograde
indicator.
in my MacBook Pro right now. How's your last year been, girl? How are you?
It's been great. I've been really busy for the last year. I've been really working lots with clients and lots of publications I've been working on. And it's just been a real whirlwind 2021 for me professionally. It's been awesome in that sense, But
That's great.
yeah,
I
that's pretty
remember
much it.
talking with you last year, and we were all so eager to get beyond 2020, which was, of course, the inception of the pandemic, the first sort of understandings we were coming to about what was happening in the world. And it was just this eagerness to move to 2021 because we thought that 2021 would be easier or better in some way. But I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said that this past year would be a year of transformation still. When you look back on what you said about this year, did much of it come to bear?
I would say the stagnancy in terms of people's professional careers was probably like the most raised issue as far as my own clients. Like they've all been wondering about their life purpose, like things have been like all in midair and such, and they were wondering what the next step would be. And as I mentioned last year, because of the elements of the astrological story, it was all primarily air and earth. So the air and earth doesn't really take root. It's just the ideas in the head that's all going. It's like
So
flowing through, but people don't really have this understanding as to progress their ideas in forward motion because they're just still wondering about this information they need to attain. You know?
yeah, so it's normal then if most of us felt like our careers stalled, or in some cases our professional entanglements were just kind of like, bleh. Like, did
Yeah.
anyone? I mean, I'm sure some people had explosive growth in 2021, but I do remember you saying stagnancy, stillness were going to be the themes. I know that it felt like that for me for sure this past year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's peek ahead. First of all, before we get into your general predictions for how 2022 will look, remind us of how you do this work and what you look at and take into consideration when you make predictions or you look for patterns.
Oftentimes, astrologers place an actual birth chart and they would make it out to be a solar chart. So solar chart is basically you're placing all in the houses of the birth chart, 0 degrees. So you start with the Aries sign, and that's typically the beginning of the cycle for the collective. So that's how we cast it. So that's like the general kind of horoscopes casted, as well as predictions that astrologers do typically make. So that's one thing. Another thing to consider is just to look into the generational planets, which are the outer planets. They are Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Those 5 planets are basically a mere reflection of the collective issues. That's what astrologers basically look to for general trends, as well as major events that could happen as well. That's basically the process into what happens in terms of forecasting, basically.
Okay, so we're looking at various alignments of things in charts. So
Mhm.
let's do this. Let's just rip the band-aid off. Give us general predictions for 2022 and what we can all expect is sort of a general theme for the new year.
There's a lot of inflow of this idealism that's going to be happening because we have a lot of water coming through. So remember last year, as I said, it was basically earth and air, and there was a little bit of water, which usually means this is something in connection to our emotional needs. But the air and earth is ideas, and earth is basically where we need to take on our ideas and let it like basically come to fruition or culmination in terms of our projects. Now, for this incoming year, We have the major planets, Jupiter's going to the sign of Pisces. And we had a little taste of that back in May of 2021. And that's like an inflow of this idealism that comes to the surface. People are looking into like spiritual modalities as the means of helping themselves out when it comes to figuring out their life story. And when that joins forces with Neptune is another outer body in association with mysticism or transcendent experiences, or even our perception of what we see as the higher power. So when Jupiter comes and joins forces with Neptune, that brings forth this overfluous of this focus on what is the bigger spectrum of things, or people will feel like such a connection to a force beyond themselves. Like that's basically like, it's almost like a new renaissance, like a spiritual renaissance of the collective in that sense. Yeah, it's
That
interesting,
feels
right?
big. That feels busier than 2021, where we were all stuck in the earth and feeling stagnant.
Yeah, a lot of emotions are going to be flowing through, and people are going to feel much more open and openly like helping of others. Like even last year, I said like collective based. Basically, people want to get involved with the major industries, probably just to become, more involved with humanitarian based things. And this year around, people will feel much more emotionally heightened. And therapy, therapy, or even the means of self-help, rituals, those kind of things are going to be like a higher octave than last year. Not to say it's just like we're all going to be burrowing ourselves in in emotions all the time, but everybody's going to feel much more human, like basically more humane towards each other. Like they're going to feel much more connected on a more
Okay.
emotional level, you know?
Okay, yeah, because you're saying this and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know that many of us can feel more than we've already felt. So to hear that there's a surge of emotion
Mhm.
and connection coming feels like, oh my gosh, haven't we been over that already? But you're saying it's going to, whereas those emotions and surges may have been more individualistic in nature and sort of personal epiphanies over the past year, now it's going to be outside of ourselves as well. Like, do you foresee any big social movements taking root? I know that that sounds kind of like already what
Yes.
started in 2020, but like, what, if anything, do you see taking root in 2022 that was maybe born over the past couple of years?
We basically like had this so this is called the changing of the nodes, which means it's going to be marking like a new eclipse cycle for the collective within 2022 to 2023. So what we have for the last couple of years before this nodes is North Node Gemini, South Node Sagittarius. That's all about information and accumulating this knowledge and discernment, and like because the North Node is basically what we're aiming toward as the collective. So the North Node's in Gemini. It's all about information, gathering up new intel, new skills, like really talking more, communicating more, getting more involved with the social networks and such. And the South Node is what to basically review and let go. So South Node in Sagittarius energy is oftentimes a bit dogmatic. So it could be like ideas, something involving like spiritual beliefs and such, those kind of things. And whenever people become more inclined towards one way of thinking, that's what creates setbacks. And the collective is basically moving toward this, basically embracing diversity and accepting new forms of information to get themselves going. Now, where we're going to right now, shifting of the nodes, as I was saying before, and it's going to be like denoting like the actual eclipse cycle we'll be dealing with for the next 2 years. So the North Node will now be moving to Taurus, and the South Node will be moving to Scorpio. So North Node and Taurus, our aim as a collective is going to be more about how to establish new structures, how to reinvigorate basically like what has been dissolved within the last couple of years in terms of 2020. So North Node in Taurus usually is an indicator that people are going to be more like, they're going to look for security. They're going to basically look to ground down and create the foundations needed to build themselves up. And the South Node energy, it's in Scorpio, so it's a water sign. It's also an association with intensity. It's an association with sometimes power issues.
Mm.
And the theme it might bring up, well, first of all, to go backtrack a little bit, the last time this nodes happened was back in 2003 to 2004. So any issues that have been let go from like, or have been overlooked within the last, I would say 18 years, that's going to likely be coming up to the surface again. So it could even be on a collective level. And I also see the South Node this time around. It may raise themes like women's issues. That's going to come back up again. Men's mental health. That's how I feel as well. How we're dealing with our emotionalities. What is the intensity and where is it coming from? It's like very psychology connected, or it's like a psychological kind of context, the South Node in Scorpio. So people are going to be like looking back in terms of like their own traumas, all those things, as the means to create that essential step to like let go once and for all. And with the North Node in Taurus, that's going to help them build up their self-esteem and security
So
and things
just to
like
go
that.
back a couple, because I want to make sure that I got this correct.
Mhm.
Did you say people will be digging their heels in more on their set of beliefs, or that they're going to be evolving to open their minds to other ones? Because I want to make sure that I'm getting the right ideas. It sounds to me like self-discovery is a big part
Yes.
of what you're saying, and looking
Yes.
inward and using that information to grow outward. But does that
Mhm.
mean that the stars say, like I said, that's a digging in of our heels on our old belief system, or is it an opening up and an expansion into a new way of thinking?
For the last 2 years, people have been more expanding to embracing different information. Absolutely. Now,
Mhm.
this step in terms of the collective, whatever information they have attained at this point, this is what they're going to build up upon. Yes.
Okay.
So it's
Okay.
like
So
the
we're like we planted the
macrocosmic.
seed and we're ready
Yeah.
to grow.
It was like, yeah, it's a macrocosmic last year. And now this is microcosmic. It's all about really basically taking on that information and then building up the essential steps needed to get themselves to take off with their projects and such.
What social movements in particular do you think will gain traction this year? I heard you mention issues specific to women's rights, and we, of course, know the discussion that's been happening with abortion rights in Texas and how that could begin to change laws in different parts of the country as well. So,
Mhm.
what specific social movements do you see either gaining traction or losing traction?
I'd say basically with women's issues, that's going to definitely be more mainstream within the next 2.5 years because it's all in connection to because when we look to Scorpio energy, I have to see where the big bad planet, or a big bad planet, or it could be a major planet. That's Pluto. That's a Pluto in its expression. So when
Mhm.
we look on the collective level, we have to look at the outer planet bodies that are in connection to the sign itself. So the South Node is going to be pointing to Pluto in Capricorn, and Pluto's been in Capricorn since 2016. 2013, my apologies. So that has been like raising themes slowly, 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 like exposing the underlying currents as to what has been overlooked. Capricorn, in this kind of expression, it's dissolving of the old hierarchical systems or the old patriarchal systems and all those things, because Pluto's a dissolver. Now with
Mm.
Scorpio as the South Node and influence, it's basically going to be exposing much more information as to what has probably been overlooked for the last several years with Pluto and Capricorn. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'm trying to understand how this will boil down practically in terms of how people absorb information or seek out information. So just from an outsider's perspective, I do think the last couple of years have seen more people seek out their own version of truth, their own informational
Mm-hmm.
source. There's been a lot of controversy in the media. Who's telling the correct version of a story? Fake news versus real
Yes.
news. Where do you get your news? And so I'm
Yeah.
wondering if we could talk a little bit about that. And
Yep.
of course, not looking for any solid answers as far as, what's right and what's wrong. But if there is something reflected in the stars about this
Yes.
desire that we really see in people lately to search out their own sources of information, because it's confusing, right? You can
It
talk to
is.
one person and their version of truth, which comes from one source, is completely different from another person's version of truth. And I think we're all just exasperated a little bit.
Mhm.
So what do the stars say about that?
Yeah, in terms of the scattered kind of information outlets that's been going on is because the North Node was in Gemini. So the Gemini energy is all about dabbling into this, dabbling into that. I'm going to listen to the podcast. That's true. This is true too. I'm reading this book. This is exactly true as well. Now, the one planet in particular that's been placing the brakes on our perception as to what's truth and not is Saturn, actually. Saturn's in Aquarius, and Aquarius is technology. So this may be a more mainstream theme for the next year, which is 2022. Saturn Aquarius basically is going to be filtering out, or actually enabling social media platforms. They may likely start filtering more, and verification badges might be more required for some accounts that offer um, insight or information for others. Yeah, and even like in
Okay,
terms of like references and things like that. Go ahead.
that sounds to me, Lumi, like the beginning of the end. One outside person deciding who is valuable or
Mm-hmm.
insightful enough to share perspectives and opinions or information. I mean, does
Mm-hmm.
that trigger something in you, knowing? I mean, knowing that we'll need that outside verification to connect, and moreover, let's take it a step
Mm-hmm.
further. How long can a system like that last? Because that to me is seems oppressive in some ways. So if we look
Yeah.
further into the future, how does that play out?
It's gonna likely be like a major thing in the spring of this year. That's when it's going to, because there's this conjunction called Mars and Saturn conjunction. So Mars is anger. Mars is anger. Mars is drive. Mars is like all about getting things done in a certain way. And it's also near reflection as to the collective drive when it's touching base with Saturn. And when Mars and Saturn go together, Mars just wants to go, go, go with their ideas, or with
Mhm.
the ideas in general. Saturn's like, I really want you to cross the T's and dot the I's. I want you to be really sure before you submit this information accordingly. That might cause a little bit of friction when it comes to like the higher, the hierarchy, or like even like the superiors who are actually running these industries and such. So people might be very distressed at that time when it comes to this information. So it's best to like have certifications. It will be likely to be the more like that will basically cover your basis whenever you want to submit information and offer advice if you're an influencer and such. Like, so our credited like accreditation is definitely going to be a huge thing for the next couple of years,
Like
because
a blue
also
check mark
Taurus.
next to our name is going to mean something. Like that's what they're going to
It
screen
be
us
the
by.
case. Yeah, maybe the case, or even having certifications in some way, like something that actually puts you on this level of, if you're in an actual particular industry, you need to have some backing in terms of being respected in the community. Or I'm not saying that, I'm not saying from my own personal perspective that you'll be more respected, but it will be likely be the actual indicator here. Um, so yeah, that's a Saturn and Mars conjunction for you. And it's like Saturn's very strict in whatever it touches, and Mars is the
Oh,
impulsive
so
planet.
fascinating. Yeah, I mean, and you're saying this, and it doesn't really strike me as all that unusual given where the discourse is right now. There is a lot of talk about how much should Facebook, for example, be censoring, and what types of
Mm-hmm.
information should be subject to review. And I think it's a real battle between free speech, you know, ultra extremists and
Yes.
people who want that regulation or want that, like you said, a certification. But yeah, it's really interesting to me. It kind of scares me though, because, there's some real jerks who have blue check marks. It doesn't really matter.
I know. It's very hard to get that, by the way. You have to actually write a book, or or
It's
be
crazy.
an
Or working
actual
media.
like work in media. Yeah, it
Mhm.
takes a lot. Like, I don't have the blue check mark, but I've written for a lot of publications online, and they still didn't take me. And I was like, okay, but that's all right. We'll
It is
not hold it
frustrating.
against them. But it is a little distressing, like in terms of you not feeling like recognized. It's like a click, if you think about it. That's very
Yeah.
Aquarius energy
Well, and
in
it
that sense, with
places.
Saturn coming to the mix.
Yeah, and I guess I don't have a problem with that in real world interactions. Of course, you're going to go to the person with an MD after their name or DO, and certifications do
Of course.
matter. But when we start to
Yeah.
talk about platforms and platforms of communication, that's when it gets a little gray area for me. Do you, looking even further into the future, is this type of verification necessity going to stay in place beyond 2022? Or do you predict it will get back to the point where people say, okay, we're going to self regulate. We don't need you, Instagram or Facebook, to tell us that we are worthy of speaking. We're going to self regulate and make sure that we only share good information? Like, will it forever stay in this phase that we're getting into next year where we need that blue check?
It's gonna likely be for like 2022, like as like the actual absolutely, for sure. But I'd say beyond that, people are just going to become much more like soul entrepreneurs or like soul influencers and such. And they'll have their own groups within their own kind of program and such. Like
Mhm.
so, like for instance, like Facebook groups. That's becoming like a little bit of a hype lately, I feel. Um, and it's just like almost like in a way like you need to find your tribe to be supported, or you need to develop your own tribe to be supported. Whereas in Instagram, it's very much like you are alone. But even with the followers that you do have, they sort of veer off into different kinds of outlets to gain information. Whereas if you actually develop your own group, you're going to be able to share freely your ideas and such. So it might be the case where you are on your own, but people who are drawn to your information will come to you for you. That's what I mean to say,
Yeah, no,
you
that
know?
makes sense. It sounds to me like you're saying it's more important now than ever to build up our own sense of community individually,
Yes.
which ironically will only take away from a greater sort of objective truth out there, right? The more people you encourage to
Mm-hmm.
act tribalistic in some ways, or okay, go find your information, you guys stay over here because you believe in each other, it feels like anti-democratic in a lot of ways, right? It's like, okay, we're going to
It
take away
is.
the ability for everybody to interact freely and share whatever they want to say. This means
Mm-hmm.
that you guys have to now form subgroups and everyone's going to believe something different, and now there is definitely no objective source to come to because everybody's going to believe their own little group. It's like, it scares me,
It's
Lumi.
very clicky. It's clicky. It's almost cultish like too,
It
in a way,
is.
because
It
that's
is.
the Jupiter Neptune kind of influence too. It's just like I need to find my guru. I need to find my guide. I am the guru and I'm the guide. Like it's just like you're almost like um you're like basically like self-employing your own role within the whole spectrum of things. You know, people believe what they want to believe, but it is very yeah, it's very intense when it comes to those things. But it could bring on a beautiful kind of collaboration with others though, like, or
Mm.
camaraderie and as such. So you know, depending on which group you are associating with, I mean, if you associate with a group that makes you feel great and you are gaining meaningful information to make yourself live a much more meaningful life, or you're living more mindfully, that's fine. That's a great thing. But if you're doing stuff that's like basically irresponsible and you're like, you're not even conscious of anything, that's not a good idea, obviously. But
Yeah,
just
because
again,
then
it's
you're
discernment.
right, right. You're living
Yeah.
in the echo chamber, which is, I think dangerous in and of itself. Oh my gosh. I'm trying not to feel really scared about our future right now. You're saying all this and I'm like, oh my God, what is happening to our world?
But it's not
Um,
that freaky because, you know, even looking into the Saturn Aquarius, like that's until 2023. So like in terms of the verification and all those things, it's not going to
mhm,
last so long. It's just like
okay.
it's a temporary thing that will raise themes of us really like finding the whole mode of this, where are we finding our references from. It's just like all about really like finding the truth in matters as to what you are, where you are basically getting this information and such, you know,
Right.
doesn't have to
And
be.
I guess the positive way of looking at this too is that you're forced to do some self reflection and to make sure that the sources you're getting information from are valid, or to make you seek out opposing points of view that challenge the way you think so that you're not living in that echo chamber. I mean, you can only be hopeful that it would encourage that type of behavior too, right? Which,
Mhm.
is what our show is all about, is breaking out of echo chambers and like listening to things that might be triggering or uncomfortable. But I do think as we move on and we interact in the digital space as much as or more than we interact in real life, it's vital for people to seek out triggering or opposing points of view, because I don't know if it's healthy to live in just a complete bubble all the time in that echo
I
chamber of
agree.
validation. you know? So
Yeah.
maybe that's the upside, is that we all now know now that we have to seek out various sources of information and then land on where we are
Yes.
or who we are.
That's how you grow. It's just like
Right.
when you stay in one way, constantly living by one principle, that's really going to make you a bit naive about how the world works, or even receiving more, like embracing more faiths or embracing more beliefs of others. Like that's actually going to make you much more of an ascended person, like in that sense.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's just like, yeah.
Where do you see some of the bigger social issues going in 2022? Things that came up that were born in 2020, medical discussions on medical freedom, discussions on race in America. Where do you see some of these bigger social movements going in 2022, gaining traction in a positive way as a result of the alignment of the planets, or will some lose some steam?
I believe this year around, people are just going to be building up themselves or building up their own self-esteem and such. So, like, even the support on all levels from all those major social movements, it's going to gain some form of traction, but it's a bit more stabilized for the
Mhm.
first half of the year. Like, the first half of the year looks great, like positive in terms of building up on the finances and even making investments and things like that. Now, when we approach eclipse season, that's going to likely be raising a bit of octaves of the past issues that we may have overlooked for some time. So that's going to be like in late April. That's when the first eclipse happens. Go ahead,
Okay,
sorry.
so yeah, let's talk about that. So first half of the year is growth, understanding, sort of growing roots into our belief systems and finding our strength. What does the second half of
Mhm.
the year look like?
Second half of the year, I mean, in terms of finances, the financial markets most likely going to be a little bit of stagnancy and going down because the housing market might go up. So it's just like making investments is going to be a little bit challenging for some people. Um, and I'd say, like, in terms of making investments from now until the spring, maybe a good time to do so. In terms of, like, obviously, I'm not telling you to buy something really beyond your beyond your bank account, but if you want to make some form of an investment for yourself, for it to grow down the road, it might be a really good opportunity to do that then. Um, Now, in terms of what else for the first half of the year, um, finances are good. When it comes to startups, like starting your own business and such, even gaining more traction, gaining much more of this exposure, momentum, and such, people will feel that burst of idealism, the burst of confidence in terms of getting going. Now, the second half of the year, we have eclipse season happening. So, I remember when I was mentioning to you before the North Node in Taurus, South Node in Scorpio. So we're approaching this solar eclipse in Taurus. So in that sense, that's going to be raising themes about like how we're going to be building ourselves up, how we're going to be working with money, thus forth. Money might be a very uncomfortable thing because it's actually people are questioning about how we're going to be harnessing money these days because we're becoming much more technology based. And even there's so much new forms of innovation coming through, it might be an overwhelming kind of feeling as to how to basically work with money, thus forth. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So,
what about entrepreneurs and people who have started their own businesses who felt, like you said early in the interview, a period of stagnancy in this past year? When can we look to make big moves, whether or not we're solopreneurs or entrepreneurs with small companies? When is astrologically a good time to, launch a new project or rebrand or do something else big within the company?
it's really nice to do that between well, I'm not telling you to do it around Mercury retrograde because that's in January. So wait until it goes direct. That's in February. So it's from February till early April, right before the solar eclipse happens. That looks like a really nice time for launch dates. It's also a really good time for exposure and such, as I mentioned before, because Jupiter's in Pisces, and that's all about basically like it's like an influence of this feeling of being compassionate, or even like depending on what brand you're working on. Though, then again, like especially people within the spiritual community, they're gonna feel an upsurge in terms of their own exposure within the collective and such. Now, entrepreneurs in general, um, they are going to be feeling like this momentum to actually have their ideas take root, especially when Jupiter goes into Aries. So that will be in May, where they will feel like this push and power into like actually exposing themselves or show themselves to their audience or collective and such for their projects to take off and such. Does that make sense, Sony?
Yeah, yeah. So the spring is a good time for big things. Anytime before April, you're saying is February to April is a good time to take on those big projects or to do something drastic within your
Yeah.
company.
Before April, because I could tell you when the first solar eclipse happens, April 30th. And that's when the solar eclipse will be in Taurus. So it might feel like, I mean, even though you are taking on, like you're staying rooted within your own like projects and such, that's great. Now, when it comes to our dealings with money, we might feel a little uneasy around that time because the solar eclipse will be highlighting the theme, especially within the financial sector. So, on a collective level, it might be a little bit of, it could be a little bit of a freaky time to like actually make major financial decisions around that time, you know?
Oh, okay. Okay, so let's talk about there seems to be like a breaking point when the first eclipse happens. You said in May. Um,
April
uh,
and May. Yeah,
April
there's
and May.
two of them.
So let's talk
Hmm.
about that second half of the year and what we can expect, sort of general themes as we are well into 2022 and we've been through that first half of the year. How does the back half look?
Okay. So for when May happens, Jupiter will be in Aries from May until October. So it's good for business launch dates in a way, but don't make any major financial decisions around that time. Not talking about like, investing all of your goods into some project and such. So it's good for like business launch dates and stirring up ideas. It's fiery and active in its expression. The only downside is it can make some people exceptionally impulsive into making major decisions. So this includes the cardinal signs and the fire signs. So the cardinal signs are Aries, Libra, Capricorn, Cancer, and the fire signs. The other two is the other two Leo is Leo and Sagittarius. So it's good for them to like actually be seen and shine for their own ability and their own like skills and such. But when it comes to like actual major decisions with their business and such, just tread carefully when it comes to making major purchases or all those things. So it's like this whole transit in its entirety, it will empower those who have left their ideas in the back burner. Um, so it's good for them to like actually take those ideas from the past and actually broadcast those ideas that they probably left behind for some time. And will
Mhm.
help them be very much noted for their gifts and such. And when we have the second wave of eclipses, which is in October, there's something called the triple conjunction. So we have the Sun, Moon, and Venus in Scorpio. So that's a really powerful time for love related matters. It's like a reawakening of connecting with others from a very compassionate level. People will start seeing other people's values and they're taking that into consideration. It's going to be most emphasized. It's about basically like, how are my dealings with other people? Like, how am I best supporting their needs as well as their like basically like their own projects and such. Like, am I being a very good support system for their growth and such? So people will very much begin to feel and tune into the feelings of others around that time, especially. And also, it's this such a financial heavy year. And I said last year it wasn't really a financial heavy year, but this year, since Taurus is like the main North Star, or like North Star, I'm saying like in terms of like influence and such, everybody's going to be like reevaluating their own sense of self-worth. They're going to be reevaluating what skills they have, basically how am I feeling with the skill set that I do have right now in this moment? Do I feel ready enough to actually start my path in terms of building myself up and feeling more confident in my own abilities? Even the word imposter syndrome will probably be more mainstream term in use, in this sense, being because Taurus is basically like a persistent worker, very persevering kind of sign to work with. And on the collective level, tuning into Taurus energy, people are going to become much more financially based. And
Mm.
the term imposter syndrome happens because they really need to take a step back in terms of seeing what skills they do have right now. And because of the ever changing impacts of technology and such, um, it might term the word imposter syndrome because everybody's going so fast when it comes to getting themselves noticed within the collective, or
Right.
maybe their businesses are taking off into high speed and such. I hope that makes sense to you.
Yeah, for sure. I'm wondering too, with midterm elections happening next year, if you foresee or the stars are showing and the alignments are showing any major changes, politically speaking, when those elections happen. Are we going to see, big changes in election results, or like a flipping of certain states? We saw
Mm.
in gubernatorial elections over the past several months that some states have been shifting back and forth between blue and red. And if anything, that you're seeing indicates that next year when the midterms happen, that we're due for any massive change there.
So for one thing to note is that this country, the U.S., it's going through a Pluto return. And I think, did I mention this to you last year? I don't know if I did. I did. Yeah.
Just tell me briefly what that means again.
Yeah, I could tell you. Pluto returns. So I already told you about what Pluto does. Pluto's dissolver. Pluto is the one that actually exposes the truth and matters when you overlook things. It cuts through all the superfluous stuff and really helps you dive in deep into seeing the root cause of distress or the root cause of intensities and such. And in this case, with Pluto returning to this original degree as to when this country was born, I'm not saying it's the exact day, which is February 22nd, it's around that time, that something, catastrophic is going to happen. I'm not saying that in any way, but this country is going to be going through a whole review in terms of like how this country was made in the beginning. People are going to be reviewing the Constitution and such, most likely, really focusing in on the old regulations that we once had. And I'd say
Like
like
in a way of
it could
embracing,
be,
like returning to straight up constitutional interpretation and getting back to the basics, or in a way of we're getting away from what we were founded on and moving
yeah.
into a new era.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's because Pluto is basically dissolver. It's the one who wants to remove all the stuff that we have built up and start fresh, start
Oh
anew
God.
in
So
some
what I'm
way.
hearing, oh my gosh, combined with what you said about needing a blue check mark to like share anything on Facebook, it sounds like we're going into a totalitarian regime and that we should all just pack up and head for Australia or
Oh boy.
somewhere else. It sounds like, to move away from the principles that this country was founded on seems a
It's
little
intense, but you know something? It's not going to last that very long. It's just going to be the next couple of years. We're going to be more like focused in on like again, it's the build up. It's the build up.
yeah.
It's realignment. Like I'd say the key phrase of the whole year here. I can't talk. Sorry. The key phrase for the year ahead is realignment. It's just like everything's been all over the place for some time now. With Taurus is the main projection as for the next couple of years. It's just basically like building ourselves up again. Even this country, it's just like because it's like it was like a big jigsaw puzzle, for some time, and nowadays, but now that this Pluto return's happening, we definitely see basically the separation of this country, as well as like people, they feel a little scattered and such, I'm sure, not to sound controversial or anything, but I think it's just all about noticing these things, recollecting everything, and redefining what it is that what we want to bring to the table for this country.
So to use your metaphor of the jigsaw puzzle, we are currently in the phase where the pieces have all been spread apart and they're thrown all over the living room floor. And next year we're
Mhm.
going to start to assemble some of those back in place.
We
But it
see what's
might,
been separated. Yeah,
yeah, okay. And but it
we
might not
see.
return to the original picture. It might be a whole new
No.
picture by the time we put it together.
Yeah, that's how I see it. And also like looking to where Pluto's going. Pluto's leaving Capricorn. Luckily, I'm happy to report that. I mean, Pluto and Capricorn, it's been great, but too intense. We need to move forward. It's going to be going to the air sign of Aquarius. And Aquarius is all about innovation, it's technology, it's invention. And for the next 20 years, we're going to have this whole inflow of air energy. And it's been happening since 2021. But with Pluto, which is the major planet in its own influence in the sign of Aquarius, we're going to see a lot of inventions, like innovations, like it's going
Huh.
to go a higher octave up. So in terms of like rebuilding this country, it's going to be very much strongly pulling towards like basically AI or
The metaverse.
invisible walls, invisible walls, or whatever that is, and like just like a lot of new innovative technologies that's going to be of influence, and there's no turning back here. You know, I
Yeah,
know.
you're saying that. You're saying that, and all I'm thinking about is like the metaverse and buying property and buying real estate in the metaverse and how we're interacting. Like, I mean, it seems inevitable, right? We've been doing this for so long. We've been
It's
communicating on
been
social
building
media.
up.
I
Yeah.
mean, soon it's just going to fuse right into our brain, and the future version of us, millions of years from now, will be integrated. And
Hmm.
yeah, it's just
And even growing our
I
own
don't know why I
food, or
feel
like
fear.
coming up, huh?
I don't know why I feel fear when I think of that though, because I think this integration of
Because
technology
it's the
into
unknown.
humanity, yeah, it's the unknown. It
It's
just
because
doesn't
it's the
really
unknown. I
feel
know.
like
It's
it's
you can't
going to
really
be
see it
efficient.
yet because it hasn't been really recognized as of now, but
Yeah.
it's slowly coming in. And even our approach to because Uranus is basically the main influence of with this Aquarius energy, as I mentioned last year, with Pluto in Aquarius. Now I got to see with Aquarius and what Aquarius's influence basically is, and that's Uranus. Uranus is currently in the sign of Taurus. So as I mentioned Taurus before, it's all about persistence, building ourselves up, really acclimating ourselves into being more foundation based. So now with Uranus in the sign of Taurus, Uranus is all about helping us to switch gears and to embrace innovation.
Mhm.
Because Taurus does not like change at all, very much not so. But Uranus is actually a really good planet to work with in the sign of Taurus because it is helping us become much more open-minded to trying new things. And whenever
Right.
you are a bit spontaneous in your approach to trying new things or embracing new things, Uranus gifts us great things, in that sense. Um,
Yeah.
and in terms of Uranus being in Taurus, the influence of that, um, it will bring up this innovative means of agriculture. That's one thing. How are we
Hmm.
sourcing our food? Are we going to grow our own food? Are we going to be basically coming up with new ways of, um, you know, basically having more nutrient dense foods or such? You know what I
Mm.
mean, right? Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, so give
Yeah.
us some, regardless of our sign, some action words that we can take into 2022, given what the themes are going to be that are going to help us remain productive and happy. What are some mindsets and words that we need to go into the new year with to really feel compatible with 2022?
Well, I said before, I see this whole year as realigning, like realigning oneself, empowering ourselves up to build. Um, we're much stronger than we think. Like we could build our lives to the actual outcome that we look for, basically. Like it's not like inevitable. Whatever's going on around us, we just have to basically, I'm not saying everybody should be in their own bubble and like not see what's going on around them, but really focus in on building yourself up and being more happy in your life.
Hmm.
Stop staying within the same mundane routine and patterning in your life. And if you keep reliving the same script that's not making you happy, it's time to step out and start like paving your own path into building
Right.
yourself up and creating joy in your daily life. I hope that
I
answered your
love.
question.
Oh yeah, I'm just writing that time code down. Um, Hold on one second. Okay, this is what happens when you're producing your own show today. So one other question for you. I put the call out on Instagram. We got some specific questions on people's particular signs. I know that we can't really run through. I don't know if we can or
Hmm.
can't. It feels like a lot to run through each sun sign through 2022, but like, can I throw out
I can
a
give you a
couple?
rundown.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's do that. And then let's really
Yeah.
focus on Libra.
Okay.
Since I'm a
Libra, of
Yeah.
course.
Okay. Well, you know what? Let's start in the beginning. I did get a specific request for a Pisces, a brief Pisces prediction as well. So where do we start? Like with Sagittarius, because that's January, or like how do we work through?
We could start with so you want to start in the new year, you're saying?
Yeah, let's start. Yeah, we might as well start with the birthdays that are in January. That would be Sagittarius, right?
Yeah.
Let's do
Yeah,
it.
let me
Just give us
just
a couple of words for each sun sign, like this is going to be a year of whatever for, this sign and blah, blah, blah. And we'll kind of give everybody a little more specific prediction and kind of look into 2022.
okay. Give me one moment.
Yeah, no worries.
So for Capricorn, we can start with Capricorn. Let me open up their chart for you. Okay. So with Capricorn, um, less pressure on themselves this year, because Pluto is actually nearing its end of its reign in the sign of Capricorn. Because they probably have been feeling like immense amount of pressure to actually redefine themselves, basically, because Pluto has been on their house of self for some time. So, it might have been a very empowering time, but they always felt like they need to go through like certain cathartic moments and reinventions of oneself, and like they were undergoing lots of changes for like the last several years in this sense, and especially in 2020 they felt the impact of that year, when it comes to like financial stability and all those things, because Capricorn's all about stability and such. Now we have a Venus retrograde happening in from December 19th to January 29th. And that's going to be reevaluating, or it's going to help them reevaluate what they basically take in as their own values, and in finances, or even self-esteem and all those things when it comes to, it could even be in the love spectrum too. So, it's basically going to help them open up into becoming much more empowered within themselves, not really looking to another to help
Right.
them feel validated in a relationship. And even on a more collective level, that Venus retrograde is going to be doing that for so many people. But especially with Capricorn, it's going to help them actually take value their own energy and not be very
Right.
adaptable to the need of the other and such,
Got it. Okay, perfect. All right, let's move on to the next one. We could just do a couple of seconds on each one so we can get through, because I know I'm straining you on time. I promise we'll be wrapped up in 5 minutes, I promise.
Alrighty. So for Aquarius, Saturn's still in their sign. It's in their first house of self. So they had that great conjunction last year, which helped them actually shine outward and be very much recognized for their gifts in the world and such. Now that Saturn is staying within their own first house of self, they need to actually become much more of structured when it comes to their approaches, like whenever
Hmm,
they want to start new projects and things. And
okay,
Saturn's going to actually help them out for the year ahead in that
got it.
regard.
Awesome.
And for the Venus retrograde that's happening for them, I like to make note of the Venus retrograde because it actually is very valuable when it comes to understanding themselves. Now, this is something to do with their 12th house. So this is their house of the inner psyche. It's all about really evaluating their own inner selves, and as well as like what's making them tick. Basically, go through this whole process of really finding your own needs and having that be met.
Hmm.
Through their own, like it could even be like to the point of their own self-esteem, like very much like Capricorn, but Capricorn's all about like what they're showing to others. But in their
Hmm.
case, they need to reevaluate what they've been overlooking some time, because Aquarius have a tendency of expanding outward to so many different people, and
Got
they
it.
just want to get to work for others. So
All right.
um
Who's next?
so let's look to Pisces. One moment. So for Pisces, they have a really powerful year because there's Jupiter, they have Neptune in the sign of Pisces, in their house of self. And this is a very impactful year for them when it comes to actually having their gifts be realized, taking chances when it comes to trying new things. It could be that. It could also be a really powerful year when it comes to starting up like new projects and things, connecting with many different walks of life on a really entirely different new level. Like even people will become much more gravitated towards you and your ideas. So basically, hold the space and be confident in your own approach to sharing your ideas outward for others.
Awesome.
Um, yeah. That's a really powerful. It's going to be a very powerful year for Pisces in that sense.
Good. Okay, well, good. That was one of the specific ones I got. So, Joelle, that was for you.
So let's try Aries. Aries has been having Chiron, their first house, for a long time, and it's been going for some time. Something to take note. And it's also the one thing to take note with Chiron is Chiron creates a shadow of doubt at times when it comes to being the first house, which is Aries. Aries have been really like taken on like this whole role of really reevaluating their state of initiating, their state of creating new things or pioneering their ideas and getting it getting it to take off and such. When Chiron is in the house of Aries, it's all about really reevaluating what is important to you right now and why. Try not to just tread forth ahead through impulsivity and such. And the Chiron is going to be shedding this light of you seeing leadership as a different thing as opposed to just taking the lead. It's all about really like basically involving all different walks of life into your circle. And through the compassionate act, that's when you're going to actually be recognized for your gifts and your actual ability to lead and such.
Awesome. Thank you for doing this, by the way, and doing this specifically to each one. This is really nice. That way people can feel like there's like a little, sort of special nugget for their sign too.
Of course, yeah. Next time we could also talk about the eclipses and how it's impacting them if you want.
Oh, yeah.
That would be really fun if you like that. It's very personalized for everybody. And this is just like on their house itself. Whenever major houses are actually placed on each sign, that could be very impactful.
Awesome. Okay, we have about 5 minutes left. Do you think we can power through the rest?
I will do the best I can. Okay. So I mentioned before Taurus has, Uranus is on Taurus's sign. So Uranus is innovation. Uranus is rebellion. Uranus is changing the norm. And Taurus is all about really staying fixated and like safe and secure and things like that.
Right.
And because Uranus is on their sign, embracing diversity, embracing innovations, and trying something new is going to actually push them forward much more soundly. The more you resist, the worse it's going to be. So you have to be really open
Taurus
to
be flexible this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, it's been for some time, but especially with Taurus and even with the eclipse impacting their sign in particular, this eclipse season, it's going to be highlighting Uranus basically for them this year. Yeah. Okay. Gemini. Okay. So for Gemini, it's going to be a lighter year for them. Because they don't have the nodes on their sign anymore. So they're going to feel much more of like this open field to actually start taking on new ideas or even starting new things and such, because they've been feeling like an added pressure when it comes to actually, basically like focusing a lot on themselves and redeveloping themselves and such. So this year will be really, it's going to be like an open field when it comes to, yeah, it's much lighter for them. I must say. Like they've been going through a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. They're getting a break. In other words.
Yes, absolutely. This is like express readings. I usually take my time more with each time.
I love it. No, this is good. And guys, if you have any questions or want to dive deep, I did my own chart with Lumi last year, and it was so great, Lumi. And you really went into great detail on personal things, professional things, and there was a great opportunity to ask a lot of specific questions. So we'll put your info in show notes, and anyone who's interested in talking with you and getting more specific ideas of what's going to happen, I should absolutely reach out. It's really, really worth it.
Mm-hmm. All right, so Cancer, they're pretty open too, because they went through quite a bit of this intensity a few years back. But one thing to take note is their career is going to be very strong this year when Jupiter actually ends up in their 10th house of career, public self and things. So Jupiter will be in Aries in, as I mentioned before, it's going to be around April and May. I'm sorry. So that would be a really powerful time to launch something around that time, or even like develop an idea of some sort when it comes to like having your talents and your actual skills be noticed by the world and such. And Jupiter being placed right there just increases luck to actually pitch your ideas. So just trust your voice and trust your own ability to start like creating traction within your career and such. So that's a really powerful, pivotal moment for your career life, you know.
That's awesome. It's another positive one. Yay.
Uh-huh. The fixed signs are going to go through intensity this year. You and I, because I know you got a Scorpio rising like me, and anybody who's got like a fixed energy kind of chart, that's when they're going to go through certain shifts if they're of their own. Not to say it's bad or anything, but it's intense.
Right.
It's going to be quite intense, but it will stimulate lots of growth for fixed signs, I must say. So now, speaking of fixed sign, we're going to Leo. So, all right. So for Leo, let's see. For them, in terms of the eclipse, that's one thing worth noting. The eclipse will be touching upon their 10th house and their 4th house. So even for Leos, their 10th house is going to actually, which is the 10th house of career, I should mention. Their career life is actually going to be a real main focus for the year ahead, especially for the next couple of years, where, you know, at one point they were very fixated on their own ideas and such, and they were like almost like constantly creating. But with the North Node, as well as the eclipse taking place in the 10th house, that's going to actually help them gain the traction, as well as this ability to have their ideas take off in full confidence. And, you know, as long as you hone in on your own creative ability and your ability to shine and such, similar to Cancer with the Jupiter in Aries, but with the North Node, as well as the solar eclipse happening in the 10th house, that's going to be magnified in its expression when it comes to actually having your ideas be seen and recognized and such. So it's a very creative and pivotal time for Leos as well, when it comes to career for the next year. Okay.
Ooh, Libra's next.
Let's look to Virgo is next. We're almost
Virgo,
there.
That's right. I forget. Impatience.
You're almost there. No, it's okay. Okay. So for Virgos, let's see. One moment. Okay. So I will mention their Jupiter being in the 7th house. That's actually really powerful. So for the year ahead, Jupiter going into your 7th house of relationships. This is a really positive time for you when it comes to developing new partnerships and such. It could be business partnerships, it could be romantic partnerships. You may even have a great opportunity to solidify your relationship that you currently have. Jupiter enhances the effect. And whenever Jupiter crosses over the 7th house, it just shows that there's an auspicious time when it comes to solidifying your relationship and such. And with Jupiter being in Pisces, it's very romantic. It's very idealistic and such. And Virgos, for the last couple of years, it might have been a little stagnant when it comes to the relationships and such. But when Jupiter actually places its rays on the 7th house, it just shows like an inflow of this luck and expansion when it comes to relating with others, or even basically taking their relationship to the next level. It's like a commitment. It's like a commitment kind of year for you. Nice. So that's positive for Virgo. Happy to report. Now with Libra. Okay, Sony. There you are. Okay. One moment. Okay. So I think the one thing worth noting for this is the eclipses and how it's impacting Libras. Libras are going to be feeling such a need to go within and really reevaluate their own resources with the partner. It's just like, it might be like a really good time to strategize and start going through the whole process of budgeting with their partners, if they have any, or even their own resources that they currently have right now at this time. When it comes to the eclipses, that's going to be enhancing this feelings of really like diving deep into seeing out to their resources that they have right now, and really basically like review the state of their own self-worth and such when it comes to what they have right now. And this might even be like a career change. It could be a career change. It could be like a career change in order to advance their own like income and such. So it is kind of like a career heavy year for Libras. But it's also like the strategizing kind of year when it comes to realigning their finances and such and getting that prioritized. Does that make sense, Sony?
That makes sense. Oh yeah, like pay attention to where you're putting your energy and resources maybe, and it could be something different than what you're doing.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a major one for Libras. Okay, let's go to Scorpio. So Scorpios have the eclipse season happening in their own first house, seventh house axis. So this is a really, really strange, like a really intense time when it comes to reevaluating their partners. It might not to say like partnerships, like it's going to be bad in any way, but it's going to be reevaluating how much are you contributing to the partnership. Focusing mostly on themselves might not be the way to go. They have to really start like getting out there and really going through the process of thinking for others in this sense. When it comes to the solar eclipse happening in their seventh house, this could also be a really good time when it comes to really evaluating the partner's needs and seeking out like the ways necessary for them to actually solidify their partnerships in that way. Because the more they focus solely on themselves, the more the partner actually draws away. So not to say it's a bad thing in any way, but it's just like you're basically going to go with this whole process of really seeing your relationships from a different kind of perspective. And also Uranus taking place in their seventh house of relationships. It's all about individualization too. So you honor your partner's sense of individuality as well as your own, and that's going to actually strengthen the partnership, you know. So not overly enmeshing too much into the partnership by the idea of love and such, but really honor the other and honor yourself in that way. Okay. And Sagittarius. Okay. So for Sagittarius, so the solar eclipse will be taking place in their sixth house. This is a really good time to actually establish new sense of routine, new structure when it comes to their daily living. They might have been so enmeshed into like a partnership story for the last couple of years, and they probably overlooked their own body and what it needs. So when it comes to the solar eclipse or eclipse season taking place in the 6th house and 12th house axis, they're going to be reevaluating like what actually is important for them, what information they want to take, how they're going to be using their bodies and such. It's very mundane, but it's actually very essential to live more consciously. And that solar eclipse taking place in the 6th will actually open doors for them to honor their body accordingly. They're going to be much more stronger because of it. So their constitution is going to be feeling a lot more heightened. So it's a good year. It's a really good year for Sagittarius to come down to some certain revelations about how they're working with their body basically, and how to work with it more meaningfully, you know, establishing new health habits. Yes.
Love about that. Okay. Lumi, thank you for running through all of that. Did we get through? Was that the last of it?
Did I touch Capricorn? I think I did. Yes, we did it.
Thank you for doing that at the last minute. I wanted to make sure everybody felt like they got a little nug out of it and, you know, had something specific to apply. Tell us before we let you go, Lumi, where we can find you and work with you individually. And if we want to set up another session, how we can get best in touch with you.
You can find me on the celestialastrologer.com, and as well as my handle, which is on Instagram, is at the Celestial Astrologer.
Thank you so much for spending time with us and looking into the year ahead. I'm just so grateful for your perspective and wisdom. Thank you, Lumi.
Thank you for having me, Sony.
Okay, see you soon.
See you.